Well, hello, guys. This is Katie with Vintage and Vinyl, back with another great reading for you. And Louie says hello as well. Lots happening in our building today, so Louie may be a little barky. We'll see how that goes. I see lots of folks tuning in the chat already, and I'm so glad Angela is joining us. And Peterson is here, and we've got Tim from Canada. I'm so glad you're tuning in, Tim. And Barbie is joining us. And Bob is here. Do-wop, Bob. I missed Johnny G's Vinyl Treasure Show on Saturday, but I will go back and watch the replay, Bob. And I hope all of you guys were able to tune in and enjoy some vintage music as well. I'm so glad all of you guys are tuning in for another fun reading. We are continuing our read of this 1950s saucy romance novel, House of Flesh. And this is pretty cool because this is a Fawcett gold medal book. And I talk about this every time. But gold medal really did set the industry standard in publishing, and they changed the way publishing was done. And Fawcett was one of the first people to create one of those spinning magazine racks that had all of the paperbacks inside. So that's very cool. Lots of great history on gold medal and Fawcett publications if you want to do some more research on that. And I'm glad Bob enjoyed Johnny G's Vinyl Treasure Show. So that is fantastic. And I love Peterson's little emojis. I think Tim was saying that she gave pretzels. And I love your little emojis. It's so fun. Hi, Tammy. I saw Tammy Renee tuning in. Welcome, welcome. And my mom's tuning in. Hi, Mom. It is a good plot, and Proud American is back. Delbert, we love your comments. Yes, in the chat, sauce time. It is. It's a fun murder mystery. It really is, and there's a lot happening in this next chapter that's really, really fun. So I'm hoping all of you guys will enjoy it as much as I did. I read it a little bit before the live, and I think that there's some new developments that are interesting. Now, the last chapter was very, very short, and we just basically were kind of getting into our main character's inner thoughts about life and all the stuff that he was dealing with. And he went to New York to kind of escape Norset, the small town that we're in, and now we're back in Norset. So that's sort of a bridge chapter to some of the mystery and fun to come. Anyone else in the chat? Let's see. Vlada is wearing a Dr. Doan mask. Ooh, Vlada. Dr. Doan, I'm telling you, he's interesting. I really bet that he killed his ex-wife. I'm just convinced that he did, but you guys can let me know in the comments what you think, because I really think that he murdered his ex-wife. This book just keeps getting saucy, so this is just a lot of fun. So thank you all for tuning in today. A couple of things happening after me. Don't forget that George the Antique Nomad is live tonight at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern, and he'll be doing a premiere. As always, I love Antique Nomad. He just is so knowledgeable. George is fantastic. So we want to tune into that. And then, of course, Tim, and over the years, is having his sale at 8 o'clock as well. So Tim, Josie, and Ma Dukes will be there. Okay, so anything else happening? Hi, Christine, Side Street Market. Welcome, welcome. Oh, and don't forget, this Wednesday, I'm going to be having Catherine Young on for Show and Tell, and she's going to be showcasing her scrapbook collection. So that is very, very exciting. Yes, and Peterson's talking about ice cream flavors from the other night. There was cheesecake, chocolate, vanilla, and she had coconut. Now, I had coffee ice cream, so I do love myself some coffee. I've got a little coffee here to get through the reading, so I do love my coffee. So I think the marshmallows were a bigger hit than the ice cream. Yeah, the marshmallows were fun. So if you don't know what we're talking about, I did an ice cream social on my channel, and I had a lot of fun guests tuning in and joining us. And so it was a lot of fun. And we played Chubby Bunny at the end, which, let me just say, I will never do Chubby Bunny again. That combination of marshmallows in your mouth, man, that was just a lot. I don't think I'll ever do that again. But I love my marshmallows. That's one thing you guys probably don't know, but I have a affinity for marshmallows. So that to me wasn't so bad. But when you try to put all of them in your mouth and they're melting, and it's just a whole gross situation. Yeah, a lot of people's, I think they did Proud American. Yeah, and I only had 4 marshmallows, but Patrick and Peterson, man, they had a lot. I think Peterson had like, what was it, 14 marshmallows that you had? Somebody counted. So anyway, that was a lot of fun. If you missed it, go back and rewatch the Ice Cream Social. We had a lot of fun playing Pictionary and laughing and having a good time. Oh, you only had 17. 17? That's still a lot, though. That is a lot. Let's see. Angela's saying, just put some Rice Krispie cereal in your mouth, and there you go. No, that's right, Angela. It would make Rice Krispies very easily that way. Okay, folks, so we are about 6 minutes in, and I'm going to go ahead and get started with the reading. We are continuing House of Flash, as I mentioned, and we are now in chapter 16. And this is a little bit of a longer chapter. So for all of you guys that felt shorted about the one-page chapter last week, you guys are going to get a little bit longer of a read today, which is fun. And let me find that chapter. I should have bookmarked these in advance. There we are, chapter 16. So are you guys ready? Chapter 16, House of Flesh, coming up right now. When I neared Wellman's store, I fought down the temptation to keep going and avoid facing Polly. But having returned to Norset, how could I avoid facing anybody or anything? Mail had accumulated for me, and I would have to get some food if I proposed to stay. So I stopped the car. Mr. Wellman was behind the counter, nobody else in the store. That was somewhat of a relief. So you're back, he grunted. That was the difference between New York and Norset. Here you couldn't make a move without everybody knowing. I explained that I had gone away for a few days. I bought groceries and asked for my mail. He went into the post office section and a minute later told me that there was no mail for me. Somebody must have picked up your mail this morning, he said. Maybe one of the hickeys when I wasn't here. And he looked at me as if I were about to say more, but then he didn't. If the story about finding the bones had gone through the village, he would be the first to know. Here in the center of gossip. I didn't want to discuss the developments, if any, with him. I gathered up my bundle. Polly Wellman was waiting for me at the car. She must have seen me from the upstairs window. Harry, she cried, and for a moment I was afraid she would throw herself at me. Hello, I said, holding a bag of groceries in front of me as if for protection. Her hands, small, clenched at her sides. She was lovely, even though she made her eyes and mouth hard. I regretted that it wasn't because of her that I returned. She seemed to read my mind. I suppose you couldn't stay away from her, she flung at me. It was at the tip of my tongue to ask whom she meant, but there was no point in trying to maintain a pretense. Her brother George must have told her about me and Layla Doan, and that was too bad. I'm back because I'm spending the summer here, I said. Don't lie. You can't stay away from that woman. Her mouth loosened and started to quiver. She dipped her head. It would be a hell of a note if she burst into tears right here in the open. Listen, Polly, her head jerked up. I hate you. And she sobbed and hurried off around the corner to the building. Norset, a quiet little village where a man could spend a placid summer. I drove on. I didn't have to unlock the bungalow door because I hadn't locked it when I had left. In the country, people seldom bothered with keys. My mail was neatly stacked on the table, and the letters in one pile and newspapers in another. I carried the groceries into the kitchen, and when I put the butter and bacon and frozen meat into the refrigerator, I noticed 6 full bottles of milk. Someone had taken 4 of them in from the doorstep. I returned to the living room and glanced around, frowning. Before it struck me that the place was unnaturally gloomy for a bright afternoon. All the window shades were drawn. I certainly hadn't pulled them down before leaving. Harry! The voice was distant, and it had a breathless quality. I opened the door. Mrs. Hickey was running across the lawn. For a gray-haired woman, she did pretty well. Harry, you crazy idiot! She gasped when she was inside. Why did you give us such a scare? How did I do that? suddenly disappearing without a word, gone for days without stopping milk deliveries. I had to take your milk in. Thanks a lot. Mrs. Hickey leaned against the wall to regain her breath. She pulled a cigarette out of her slacks, and I struck a match for her. Bill sent out a police alarm for you, she said. Almost everyone in the village was questioned. What in the world had you been doing for the last few days? Why the fuss? I spent some time in New York, that's all. I tried to tell the menfolk and my family that you're free and single and that you can get in your car and go anywhere you please, but they acted as if something terrible might have happened to you, and they kept whispering to each other and refused to tell me what it was about. Now, why should my husband and my son treat me like a child? Something is going on. If she didn't know, obviously nothing sensational had developed concerning the bones, not publicly anyway. Well, here I am, hale and hearty, I said, no to change the subject, and waved at the table. I see my mail as well as my milk was well taken care of. Polly Wellman brought your mail this morning. Mrs. Hickey blew a thick cloud of smoke between us, and through it her eyes disapproved of me. It was an excuse to see if you'd return, she cried her eyes out. Harry, that girl is just in love with you. I wish she weren't. You men, you wish she weren't, but you didn't think of that when you made love to her. So her weeping was done on your shoulder, I said dryly. A broken-hearted girl has to weep on somebody's shoulder. Angrily, she mashed out her cigarette. From the door opened, Mr. Hickey came in. Jessica, why don't you leave that boy alone and let us live his own life? Must have been listening to at least part of our conversation. We changed nods. Nobody can live his own life, she snapped at him. Whatever you do affects other people, and I don't like the way mysterious things have been happening, like in the bungalow last night. There's nothing mysterious about a sneak thief, Mr. Hickey said. This neighborhood hasn't had a robbery in years, and on top of that, you and Bill being so worried over Harry's disappearance. The next day when I found... Do you mind letting me in on this? I broke in. I was home alone last night when I saw your light in the window, Mr. Hickey told me. Naturally, I thought you'd return, so I came over. I had scarcely stepped out of my house when a dog started to bark and the lights went out. A dog? I murmured. Yes. When I reached the bungalow, the dog was gone. I switched on the light, but nobody was here. The shades were drawn. You didn't leave the shades drawn, did you? I don't remember, I lied. I was in here Sunday morning when I took your milk, and I'm positive the shades weren't drawn then. You can see electric light right through them. Over her gray head, my eyes met her husband's, and they had glints in them. He knew as well as I who my caller had been. I said lamely, it might have been a tramp and his dog who slipped in to make a meal for himself. And built a fire too, she said, though he couldn't know how long he'd been gone. I had noticed before in the fireplace the paper and kindling and logs were all expertly set. It would need only a match to start the fire. Oh, that, I laughed. Well, it was that way when I left. No, it wasn't, she declared crisply. When I took in your milk Saturday, I used the ashtray on the table. It was so full that I had to let some of the stubs out in the fireplace, and I picked up and emptied the ashtray. There was nothing there but some wood and ashes. Then, this morning, I saw that. She waved a hand at the fireplace and then fixed me with a stern glaze. Harry, you're not telling me the truth. I was fishing for an answer when Mr. Hickey came to my aid. Woman, he said, I must maintain that a man is entitled to live his own life. Harry is back and we're delighted. If you folks don't mind, I said, I'd like to get out of these city clothes. All right, throw me out, Mrs. Hickey flared. I assured her that I hadn't meant that at all, but she insisted that I had, and that she was fed up with men, and now me lying to her, and she hated mysteries anyway. And showing a flesh cigarette between her lips, she left without lighting it. By now, I should have been used to the woman misunderstanding, or perhaps understanding too well. Mr. Hickey lingered a moment longer to throw me a ribald wink and followed his wife. I pulled up the shades to let the brightness in the bungalow and then stood there looking down at the fireplace. So last night, Kenneth Doane had played poker and Layla had come here as she had the Sunday before. She hadn't heard that I was away. Not finding me in, she had expected me back any minute and had set the scene. She had pulled the shades down and built the fire because she liked firelight or dim lamplight for lovemaking. Then Major, on guard outside, had barked a warning and she had turned off the light and slipped away, perhaps returning after Mrs. Hickey had left, wanting some more. I could have kicked myself for not having been home last night. In the early evening, Bill Hickey dropped in. I had expected him. He had changed his uniform for white ducks and a sweatshirt. He had an after-dinner cigar in his mouth and a scowl on his face. "You gave us a fine scare," he growled. "What did you expect? That Doane had murdered me too? It could happen. You wouldn't be the first guy knocked off by a jealous husband." Was there anyone now besides Mrs. Hickey and probably Kenneth Doane who didn't know? "I suppose your father gave you that line," I said. "He sure did. By Saturday, he got worried. He gave me the lowdown about you and Mrs. Doane." Bill rolled his cigar on his lower lip. "See, a guy like Doane, he killed his first wife to be free to marry another woman, so he wouldn't stop killing a man that the other woman was playing around with. When I left for a few days, I didn't realize how your father's mind would run. My mind ran like that too, when I knew what he knew. Your car was gone, but Doane could have hidden it. Your clothes were here, milk, everything. So I went over to look and have a talk with Doane. Don't get that worried look, Harry. I'm no heel. I didn't let the cat out of the bag. I asked him if I'd seen you in the last couple of days and had a little look around." "What did you tell Mrs. Doane?" "I didn't get a chance to tell her anything. That was Saturday afternoon. She was shopping. Yesterday I went there and nobody was home. Guess they were out for the day. Anyway, that gave me plenty of chance to look over their place." His mouth twisted. "So that's how Mrs. Doane didn't know you were here and came to pay me a visit last night." "Ma's got A-grade mystery, but Pa and I know who was waiting for you here," I said. "Talking of mysteries, did you get anywhere since Thursday? Did you find any more bones?" Bill sagged a little, all the way from the top of his head to his knees. He sat down opposite me at the table and placed his cigar on the ashtray. "No, we didn't find any more bones. We sent down those two to New York City, where they have a guy in their missing persons bureau who's a whiz at identification. Report came back a little while ago. It said the bones belonged to a woman under 30, about Alice's height and weight. But there's no evidence. It's evidence enough for me to get to what I want, but no evidence in the court of law. So what if a couple of bones of a young woman were found on Doane's property? Even if we could positively prove they were Alice's, we can't prove she was murdered or who murdered her." He thumped his fist on the table. "There's not a thing except being sure in our own minds, and we can't hurt him with that." "Well, have you questioned him yet?" "What's the good? He'll deny it, and all we'll do is put him on guard. By the way, Harry, keep your lips buttoned. Outside of the police and you and Pa, no one knows about this. We want to keep that this way because we got to continue the investigation." "Doane claims he's divorced, and he divorced Alice in Florida. Can't you check?" That's what we're doing. Anyway, the DA is. It's mostly in his hands now. We're wired to Florida so we can find out if Alice Doane divorced Kenneth Doane 2 years ago." "And what if it's not on the record? What then?" "Well, we'll be more sure. That's all." He rose and stood chewing his cigar. "I'll get him yet. Someday I'll get him." He strode to the door and turned. "You should have known to stay away, Harry, but I'm a man like you, so I know how it is when a woman gets in your blood. I guess I couldn't keep you two apart even if I had a right to. But be careful, Harry, and tell Mrs. Doane to do the same." I sat at the table with my hands flat on it and watched the door close behind him. Later, I went outside and shot baskets until it was too dark to see. I went to bed early, but not to sleep. I lay thinking about how it would have been if I had been home last night. All right, guys, that is it for chapter 16. We will continue on with chapter 17 next week. Let's see who else has joined in the chat and what we've been talking about here during the reading. Let's see. Hi, vintage loving nerd. Cheryl, thanks so much for joining. I'm glad you're here. And let's see who else. Of course, bacon. Yes, yummy bacon. I love bacon. Crazy idiot. Yes, he is. He went out of town and didn't tell anyone. I know, those wily tramps and their dogs. Yeah, the woman that is married to Mr. Hickey, she's a little tiresome, I agree. That's okay, Sharon. Oh, that's all right. You missed some of the shenanigans, but you can always go back and catch it on the replay. I wonder how many mysteries have this line. It must have been a tramp. Probably a lot, Bob, as we've been finding out. Bob collects these vintage books as well, and we talk about quite a few of them over on Instagram, and there are some interesting mysteries. In fact, Angela sent me one recently that said something about a murdered wife or something, so we'll have to read that one next. Tim, if we thought you were talking about Katie, I would figure a way to block you. Let's see. You think maybe Dr. Doan is innocent? Well, it could be, but I really think that he murdered his wife. However, maybe there's something else going on here that we don't know. There could be still a plot twist, so we got to stay tuned for that. Yes, dun, dun, dun. Let's see. I need to rewatch these readings. I've only seen a few. Yes, Angela, go back and watch to see the ones you missed so you can catch up. Oh, thank you, Mary R. I'm glad you're tuning in. Yes, The Vanishing Bride. That's it, Angela, The Vanishing Bride. Yeah, so there's a lot happening in this story. I'd still have all my money on Dr. Doan. I think he's the one that probably murdered his ex-wife. But I really think that maybe he's sleeping around with our main character's ex-wife. And, of course, our main character, Harry, is sleeping with Dr. Doan's wife. So there's that for you. So I think there's a lot going to be happening in the next couple of chapters here. I'm all for My Sister, My Bride. Yes, that is a book. So there's a lot to read still in other books like this. I've got a whole slew of them, so I will not run out of books. So we will be continuing readings after this book. But this is fun. I want to know what happens because I'm very interested. Now, I cannot be bribed, and I do not read ahead except for a few minutes before the live, so I can get used to the chapter. So I don't know what's going to happen next. I have not read all the way through this book. So that is definitely a gutsy thing to do when you're doing a live reading. But I've been having fun just being as surprised as you all are. And I think that's fun. So guys, that is it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this reading. Also, make sure you check out a couple of the lives happening this evening. I'll be doing split screens if I can. Tim is having a great sale with Josie and Ma Dukes. Tim, and over the years, they are awesome. They have some fantastic glass and things for sale. And then, of course, don't forget the Antique Nomad at 8 o'clock is having his premiere. And Bob, yes, Bob is keeping quiet because he has read all the way to the end. So he knows what happens in this book, but I'm so glad Bob's tuning in. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Don't forget, of course, this Wednesday, 9:30 Eastern, Catherine Young is going to be on my channel, and we will be doing a fun show and tell on vintage scrapbooks. And I'll be having my Bring Back the Brooch premiere at 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Not 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock Eastern on Wednesday. So make sure you guys tune in for all of that. And I hope, as always, you guys will stay in, stay safe, and Ben's YouTube. Bye-bye now.